Mustafa, he said, I know the cure for your wife, and you must go out immediately and get it. And he prescribed 6 grams of berberis and 6 grams of afyun. Afyun is opium, right? Now I want you to get this picture here. I'm in Karachi, right? An American going out to a bazaar to look for opium. This is not going to work, right? And I've seen Pakistani jails. You don't want to go there.
Considering the risk of going to jail, what would you do? Should you go to the Pakistani bazaar and search for that illegal substance, or consider the whole thing to be just wishful thinking of some dark age practice? Awareness of the unseen. Next on SoulTV.net.
Anyway, I looked at him and I said, Sheikh Ikram, and I kind of said what I just said to you. And he said, no, he said, we'll make dua, right? So he made a dua, and I said, Ameen to that. And I took off into the bazaar. Now, I don't know if some of you may know Karachi. There's a masjid in Karachi near the docks, or where there are stores all around it, but right in the back of it is a very strange bazaar. It is a bazaar, right? It's where pretty much anything that is unusual and maybe slightly haram is back there. So anyway, I was directed to that place because there were a lot of well-known dawakhanas there, places where you can buy herbs and things like that. So I trusted Sheikh Ikram's direction, and I went into that bazaar. Well, I had, as you can imagine, quite a difficult time there. I went from one dawakhana to the other, literally being chased sometimes with broomsticks, people calling the police on me. I had to run around hiding. It was quite a morning and an afternoon. And finally, toward the end of the day, I came up with nothing. There was just nothing there. Well, evening started setting in, and there were a lot of strange people coming out, so I decided that I'll head back. So I'm looking for my way out because it is a labyrinth behind the mosque there. And just as I'm leaving that area, I feel a tug at my sleeve. I mean, a hand had pulled up from the ground and started tugging at my sleeve. And by that time, in Pakistan, when you get a tug at the sleeve, at least for me, I kind of had an automatic reaction, maaf karo. I was a beggar trying to get some money out of me or something. But then, the guy really pulled hard on my sleeve. And he said, no, he said, and I turned around and I looked at him, and there sitting on the ground was this lovely old man with a beautiful white beard and a white hat, a chisti cap. And he was sitting there with a little black bag on a little white sheet. And I realized at that very moment that this was something very special. It was because he was completely the odd man out there. It was a shining being. And he looked at me and said, please sit down on this blanket with me. And I did. I sat down with him. And we started a little bit of small talk, how are you, and so on. And I said, he asked me, he said, what are you doing here? And I was reluctant, as you can imagine, having been chased around with broomsticks for the last few hours. I didn't feel like telling him exactly what it was, but he then said, you know what I'm doing here? And I said, what? He said, last night, now think of this, this was the night before the day, today, that day, that I had gone out there and Sheikh Ikram had made this dua. And we had made this dua together. I followed him in that dua. He said that last night, his dead sheikh had come to him in a dream and told him, you must go to this place and sit there, and there you'll see an unusual happening. I mean, it's, all right, and it was. I mean, and he said, you are the unusual happening. And so, I knew at that moment that this was already, another thing entirely. So I explained to him, I said, well, Sheikh Ikram, who is with us, he gave me instructions to come here to get 6 grams of opium, or rather 6 grams of berberis. and 6 grams of opium. When I mentioned the opium, he stopped, and he had this little black bag with him, and he took it out, and he opened it up, and there he pulled out one of those little, brass scales that you see a lot with little kind of weights and stuff, and he was digging in his bag again, and he pulled out a plastic container or bag or something, and of course I noticed right away that there was a black tarry substance in his bag. And he pulled it out and he gave it to me, and well, actually before he gave it to me, he put it on the scale. And again, not to my surprise, but to our delight, it weighed exactly 6 grams, and it was the pure black tar opium. And he gave it to me, and then as he gave it to me, he packed everything up and he stood up, and I stood up with him. And he hugged me, and I hugged him, and of course then this idiot, like I am, I pulled out a 50 rupee note, and I was going to, hand it to him as payment, and he said, no, he said, this is, if this is fi sabilillah, I've come here, to serve you, and he gave me that. Well, now I had the opium, and I had the Berberis, and I went back to my, oh, by the way, I didn't even know his name, and he walked away from me very quickly. Obviously, here's an American standing with opium. But he walked away very quickly. Well, I went home and I had a mortar and pestle, and I mixed the opium with the Berberis with a little bit of lemon. And Sheikh Ikram asked me to make pills the size of garbanzo beans. Now, keep in mind, garbanzo beans, that I know of they're about, quite large. And I made them, and I started giving them to my wife. And needless to say, she started feeling very good. And especially giving her 3 of these pills every few hours, it was an envious condition to observe. So after a day or two, Sheikh Ikram came to our home to check on us to see how all these things were going along. So he comes in and he wants to visit her, and of course he goes in, and then he comes out of the room and he says to me, I want to see the pills, right? So I showed him the pills and I poured it in his hand, and I'll never forget the look on his face. He looked at those pills and then he looked at me and he said, too big. But, if you've seen Sheikh Ikram, when he smiles, there's the sun coming from behind the clouds. So, he said, too big. And he took it and said, do you have a knife? And he cut those pills into 4 sections. And so, of course, then the right dose. But mashallah, within just a day, that situation was rectified. And, he explained that Berberis and opium constrict the capillaries inside the uterus, and so it bleeding subsided. So that's the story I wanted to share with you today. Assalamu alaikum.
Mum took me on a little spree for South Africa, and she said, I'm going to buy you a really nice nightgown with stars all over it, silk. And she said, you never know, you may meet Mr. Right. I said to her. And she said, no, you're in your 50s, that kind of thing won't happen. And you're far too fussy. And I said to her, Mum, when I meet the right kind of person, I will know I'll get married quickly, quietly, with a very small reception, and that'll be it.
Awareness of the unseen will continue on the next Soul TV's update. To receive periodically your newsletter update, please click on subscribe to Soul TV. It's absolutely free. For SoulTV.net, I'm Patricia Rayner.